Hello, it's ALIMECH. In today's video, I will show you necessary fluid changes on your Toyota Camry that can be done at home without using any special tool. I did these videos individually, but since I have new subscribers and I was getting questions about these fluid changes, I thought to make it all in one video for you guys. In this video, I will be showing engine oil change with the filter, automatic transmission fluid change and flushing the axis, brake fluid flush and radiator flush. So we're gonna start with engine oil change. So we're gonna need a 4 liter of 0W20 synthetic or fully synthetic oil and a 1 liter of same viscosity. This 2.5 4-liter cylinder engine needs 4.6 squirt, which equals to 4 liter and 350 milliliters of engine oil. We also gonna need a filter cartridge, which comes with new O-rings, 64 to 65 millimeter filter socket, funnel, and oil drain pan. So now we know where we need to get the job done. Let's pull the dipstick out and remove the oil cap. I'm gonna jack up the car and put it on a jack stand. Because I will be working with camera and light, I will need more space. But even if you don't have a jack and jack stand like me here, you can use your car's jack just to lift it up a bit so it's easier to get under the car. But I usually don't use jack and jack stand when I do my regular oil changing. Alright, let's remove the drain pan plug and throw it under the engine. The first thing you will see is the oil filter, which is located at the front of the engine oil pan, and then the oil drain bolt. Let's get a 14mm and undo the drain bolt. While the oil draining, let's work on the filter. So the first thing we're gonna do, remove this drain plug. It will drain the oil from the filter, so it doesn't make a mess when you remove the plastic housing. Every new filter comes with plastic adapter that will be inserted on the filter housing like that to drain the oil filter. Okay, after the draining is done, remove the plastic adapter, give it a quick wipe and then remove the plastic housing. Now we can remove the plastic housing. It will be almost empty from engine oil. And here is how it looks like if you don't drain the oil with the adapter that comes with the filter. It will make a mess and spill the oil all over the floor if your drain pan not big enough. Even if you don't wipe inner filter housing, not a big deal. But I always do that because I've seen piece of O-rings before. That's why I always wipe it off and make sure it's clean. Same thing with the filter housing. I always clean it with carb cleaner and wipe it off before installing the new O-rings and the filter. Use a small flat screwdriver to remove the O-rings. And now it's time for the new O-rings and the filter. I'm just gonna put this on and then tighten it later on the engine. Make sure the O-ring sits in its groove and then put the new filter on. I'm just gonna use some oil to lube the new O-ring. It will provide better seal and easy removing for next oil change. Alright, let's put the filter housing on. Hand tighten it first and then use the filter socket. And then tighten the drain plug and we are done with the filter. By the time we are done with the filter, the drain is completely done. Now we're gonna put the drain bolt back on. And I like to use some carb cleaner or a brake cleaner, so if there is any leak, it will be obvious to find out. Next, I'm gonna jack up the car and remove the jack stands, so we can have accurate level reading after filling up with new engine oil. Alright, let's fill it with new oil. I'm gonna empty the whole 4 liter and then use 1 liter for the 350 milliliter that will remaining. For the 1 liter, I always like to put 2 holes on it and then use measuring cup and measure 350 milliliter of engine oil. In my case, it's 250 milliliter cup, so I will add 250 milliliter and then another 100 milliliters. Here is the 250 and here is another 100 milliliter and we are done with filling up with new oil. Alright, let's remove the funnel and put the cap back on. After a few minutes letting the oil settle, we're gonna measure it with the dipstick and we are at the right level. And we are done with the oil change. But I always like to check the oil catch can that I installed in my previous video and see how much oil collected and not letting create carbon buildup in the engine. Detailed video will be in the video description box below and YouTube card if you wanna check it out. That much oil being collected after 5,000 miles. You just have to drain it and clean it with the oil change. It will keep the intake valves and the piston head clean. I also like to clean the oil catch can strainer plate before putting the canister back. Now we are almost done. Let's start the engine and check the filter housing in case there is any oil leak. We're gonna be using right side arrows of the steering wheel. Go to the gear icon, go all the way down to the maintenance reset, press yes. Maintenance reset completed. And here's how to replace engine oil and the filter on 2015 to 2017 Toyota Camry. Alright, moving on. Next will be transmission oil change. The problem with these newer models, they don't have transmission dipstick, so you can check the level of the transmission fluid and fill it up from the top. But in a few minutes I will show you everything step by step and it will be much easier than you think. So here are the things you will need before doing this job. For transmission fluid type, you will need Toyota's WS fluid type. If you are using other brands WS type, make sure it mentions for Japanese cars. We will need 2.5 liter of this 4 liter can. Approximately 2 liter will be drained, and I will show you how to flush the extra half liter later, which it will determine the right level in the transmission without having dipstick. We also gonna need gloves, 1 meter hose, and a funnel like this. You can also use a DC pump for filling up new fluid, which makes the job much easier, so in this video I will show you both ways. After making sure the engine cool to touch and it's safe to work on, you should know that transmission filling plug at front driver side. We're gonna need to lift the car a bit to reach the transmission drain plug, and I will use car's jack, no need to use garage jack. And the second thing we need, start the engine and steer to the driver's side so we can access filling plug. You can jack up the car and remove the wheel as I did in my previous video when I changed the transmission fluid on 2019 Toyota Camry, but you don't have to do that. Just jack up the car to the point where you have room to work and for your drain pan. So jack up the car to the point that the front wheel is still on the ground. Alright, so the filling plug located behind this cover. So we're gonna need a wrench and 10mm socket. After removing these two 10mm bolts, the cover won't come off. There's a plastic tab holding it behind the wheel well. I had to remove that as well. Here is the filling plug and it's 24mm size. Let's get a 24mm socket and undo the plug. Even on the filling plug it mentions to use WS transmission fluid only. Alright, drain pan is ready. Let's get under the car and undo the transmission drain plug. So for that we're gonna need 6mm Allen key. Just keep in mind, removing drain plug not gonna give you complete drain from transmission pan. There's a plastic straw inside it and needs to be removed as well. It's also a 6mm Allen head. This straw determines how much fluid is the right level when we add new fluid. I will get to that when we add new fluid later. While the fluid draining, it's better to lower the car to the flat level. It will help with completely draining transmission pan. Alright, I cleaned everything. You don't have to do that, it's not necessary, but I always do that. Let's put the straw back and make sure to only hand tighten it. You don't have to over tighten it. A quick wipe and then putting the drain bolt back on. And I only hand tighten it as well, because after filling we have to drain the overflow fluid with a warm and running engine. I had to drain the old fluid and show you guys how much being drained, so you don't have to buy extra liter and not adding extra fluid as well. In this case it's only 2 liters and I will add 2.5 liters and then I will drain the extra half liter. Alright, let's open the can, and I also attached the hose and the funnel as well. If you're working alone like me, clamp the funnel like this so the fluid won't spill on the car accidentally. And I also placed a shop towel under the funnel in case of any oil drip. This is a 4 liter can. Let's pour half of the can and a little more in the funnel. You can use a DC pump like this, which makes the job much easier, especially when the weather is cold and the fluid gets a bit thick. Alright, I just put 2.5 liters. Let's take the hose out and put the filling bolt back on. A quick cleaning so it doesn't accumulate dust. Now we can put the cover back on. I will just tighten the two 10mm bolts and not putting the plastic tab back on, because I'm planning to change the transmission oil every 30,000 miles. That way it will be easy to reach the filling plug every time I want to change the transmission fluid. Now we can start the engine and let it warm up. You can shift the gears as well. It should be soft shifting. Let's not forget the oil in the transmission not at the right level, but it's a bit more than the right level. So take the car out for a test drive just to warm up the gears, but avoid aggressive acceleration. Alright, we are back. The transmission is warmed up and the car at the flat level. Now we can open the drain plug and drain the overflow oil, and it will be at the factory level. Keep that in mind, only overflow oil will be drained because of the plastic straw. Draining is done. Now we're gonna put the drain bolt back on and tighten it back. Cleaning drain bolt is important in case of leaking oil. And now we are done with changing transmission oil. You must have softer gear shifting after oil change. You should do this oil change every 30,000 to 50,000 miles. And here is how to replace transmission fluid on 2015-2017 Toyota Camry without using any expensive tool. Next fluid will be brake fluid flush. So for 2017 Toyota Camry, I will be using Pristone synthetic .4 brake fluid. You can use .3 and .4, but I will be using .4. We're gonna need 2 bottles like this, each one 12 ounces, 350 milliliter, and it will last 50,000 miles. Before changing brake fluid, I will be using brake fluid tester. It will measure moisture percentage in the brake fluid. Because brake fluid hydroscopic, it likes to absorb water. So higher moisture content means we have to flush the brake fluid. Speaking of flushing, I will be using this brake fluid pump for flushing each wheel without needing anyone to press the brake pedal. And the assembly is very easy. Short hose first and then the container. Long hose and then the valve that matches your car's bleeding valve. And you have many valve sizes to choose from. I chose the smallest one. It also comes with extra hoses and Y connectors if your car has dual brake piston and 2 bleeding valves. This kit for the price has a decent suction, and we will see how long it will take to bleed one brake caliper. Alright, now we know what we need. Let's take the brake fluid cap and test the fluid. And I like to take the filter strainer out. It's easier for suctioning old fluid and adding new fluid later. Alright, let's turn the tester on and put it in the fluid. Let's see how much moisture we got. According to the tester, we have humidity more than 4%. If we leave it like this, it will damage all the seals in the brake components. Okay, first thing we need to do, suction the old fluid from the reservoir. So for that, I will change the head from this to needle valve shape. I recommend to put few shop towels around the reservoir in case of spilling any brake fluid, because brake fluid corrosive. It will remove a paint if it stays for a long time. So the first thing we need to do before flushing, suction the old fluid from the reservoir so we can fill it with new one. I'm using the same kit. In this case, no need to use turkey baster or anything else. Because of the size of the bleeding container, I had to drain the container and continue suctioning all the fluid from the reservoir. So in this case, take your time and make sure the reservoir is completely empty. It took me 2 times to drain the container and empty the whole reservoir. Let's uncap the new brake fluid and fill up the reservoir. It will take about half of the bottle. After filling up, immediately put the caps back on because we don't want the new fluid absorb moisture. Here's how the flushing procedure will be. We're gonna start from furthest point to closest point. Rear right wheel, rear left. Front right, and then front left is the closest point to the master cylinder. I'm gonna swap the head again to bleed the brake caliper from all corners, starting from rear right wheel. Removing rubber boots, putting 8mm wrench on the valve, bleeding valve is on. Now I'm gonna open the valve and pump the bleeding kit. It will suction new fluid from the reservoir to the brake calipers, and you will see when the new fluid comes out. And that is it, the flushing procedure done for this corner. After the flushing is done and new fluid came out, I will close the valve, pumping the handle again and then remove the hose from the valve. That way it won't drip any fluid on the caliper. But I always wipe the valve. In case of any leaking, it will be easy to find out. And the last thing, don't forget to put the rubber boots on, and we are done here. After bleeding each corner, you need to drain the container, because I flush it till I fill the whole container, and I wanted to make sure to have a good flush. The important thing is to fill the brake reservoir with the new fluid again after bleeding each wheel, otherwise it will suction air into the system. Alright, moving to the rear left wheel and doing the same procedure. Alright, I'm gonna speed up the process, but for each wheel you're gonna need 5 minutes for bleeding each caliper. In case of spilling any drop of brake fluid, just spray some water and that is it. We're gonna repeat the same procedure again, draining the old fluid, filling new fluid to the master cylinder. This time we're gonna flush front right wheel, and for that we're gonna start the engine and steer the wheel. I could jack up the car and remove the wheels, but I wanted to show how to flush brake fluid at home without having that much tools. As you guys saw it, I just used the kit and 8mm wrench. For each wheel bleeding will be the same procedure. And here is the last one, which is front left wheel. It is the closest one to the master cylinder. We're gonna fill the reservoir to the right level for the last time. And I'm gonna take the filter strainer out real quick to test the fluid condition comparing to before. It's at first yellow light and it means okay. Let's not forget to put the strainer back and putting the cap back on, wiping everything off, and we are done here. This kit made bleeding gel so much easier. For the price it has a decent suction. I wish it has a bigger container, but that's pump's capacity limit. Tool wise I only used this 8mm wrench as you guys saw the procedure. Next item I would recommend you to get is this brake fluid tester. You never know if the brake reservoir cap was loose and absorbed moisture. And for brake fluid quantity, for Camry you will need two 12-ounce bottles, which I almost used all and only that much left to be accurate. I also bought this brake fluid bleeder kit, but it needs compressed air, which won't be useful for many of you. This bleeding kit is good for the price if you are willing to work on your car. I will make sure to put some links in the video description box below where you find what I used in today's video. And here is how to flush brake fluid at home in an easy way. And the last fluid change and flush at home will be radiator coolant. Here I got my 4 liter of concentrated coolant and 4 liter of distilled water. You can use pre-diluted coolant as well. A quick way to know when you have to change the coolant, by measuring the voltage between the coolant and the ground. It should be less than 0.3 volts, but in the manual it says every 30,000 or 2 years, and my car 3 years old, so I'm gonna change it anyway. Before working on the engine, make sure the engine cold to touch and the temperature is 0. To make the job easier, I'm gonna jack up the car, so make sure the gear shifter on parking position and the e-brake engages, and secure the rear tires. For jacking up the front wheels together, always use the subframe. Okay, the car on a jack stand, it's very safe to work on. I'm gonna remove the engine cover to get access to radiator drain valve. For removing the cover, we just have to undo these 10mm screws and some plastic clips. Here is the drain valve located on Toyota Camry and most of the cars. If your car doesn't have one, remove the lower radiator hose to drain the coolant. By removing the cap, it will drain faster. We are not only flushing the coolant, we're also gonna wash it with distilled water and then fill it up with brand new coolant. So I'm gonna take a sample to see the difference. For flushing, I recommend removing the thermistor. It will let the distilled water circulate through the engine. If you don't remove it, you have to wait till the engine reaches idling temperature and then opens. But I don't want the engine get that hot and then I have to wait till it gets cold. By undoing two 10mm nuts, the thermostat cover comes off. That was the top one, and here is the bottom one. Using only the gasket and then put the cover back on so it doesn't leak while we flush it with distilled water. Okay, now we're gonna put the thermostat cover back so we fill it with distilled water to remove any leftover coolant. And also, don't forget to tighten the radiator drain valve. It's full now, no bubbles. Start the engine to circulate and turn the heater on so it cleans the heater core as well. We're gonna let the engine idle for 3 minutes. We can already see it's mixing with the coolant. Okay, it's been 3 minutes. Turn the engine off and drain the distilled water. This is the first flush. I'm gonna take a sample. You have to repeat the process till it's clear. That was the second flush. It's clear. It really depends on the car. Sometimes it takes 3 to 4 flushes. I removed the reservoir to drain the old coolant and then put it back. We just completed cleaning from the old coolant. I will remove the cover and put the thermostat valve back so you fill it with coolant. Put the gasket back on and remember, this is how the direction was. I'm using Toyota Long Life red coolant, mixing 50-50 ratio with distilled water. For the radiator I didn't mix the coolant, so for every liter of coolant I pour 1 liter of distilled water. I only mix it for the reservoir. Now we're gonna start the engine to let the bubble out and refill it with more coolant. This is the mixed one. I will fill the reservoir. And the reservoir at the full line. We're gonna wait till we see the fan starts, and then we know that the thermostat valve opened and the coolant circulating and letting the bubbles out of the system. The engine at the idling temperature, I see no bubbles. I'm gonna remove the funnel. So we used 3 liters of concentrated coolant and 3 liters of distilled water. So you will need 6 liters if you buy pre-diluted coolant. With draining and flushing twice, we come from this to this. Maybe there is not much difference from the old and the new coolant, but look what I found in the old coolant. And that was how to flush the engine coolant. If the video was helpful, hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the underground. It should be less than 0.3 volts, but in the man. This is the first flush. Now we're gonna start the engine to let the bubble out and refill it with more coolant. And here are the most important fluid changes on Toyota Camry that can be done at home without using special tool. Hope you found the video useful and learned something new. If it was, like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.